Hey guys, Carla here again, the founder and CEO of Ignite Your Learning, going through Othello. So I kind of already discussed this structure a little bit in my previous video, but what we want to look at is the, paragraph one to start with. So when you're looking at a structure for this particular essay, you really want to consider and follow the structure that Shakespeare's already created. Back in his time, and like basically prior to the 21st century, when postmodernism and has become quite prevalent, and texts are not as linear, they could have different middle, beginnings and ends. Shakespeare had a really set structure. So it starts in one place, there's a middle, and then it comes to a resolution where order is restored and everything goes back to normal, the way it should be by the end. And that's really the best way to structure this essay, because what you want to do is you want to be able to encapsulate all of the key themes and ideas, but do it in a way that's cohesive. So a lot of students structure this essay going theme by theme. So it's like, oh, paragraph one, here's the theme of deceit. Paragraph two, theme of gender. Paragraph three, whatever. So you don't want to necessarily base it on themes, but all of the themes will be discussed, which is the way you want to go about it. Because if they ask you a key theme, you want to be able to answer any question they give you. And if you have just isolated thematic discussions in each of your paragraphs and they don't connect with each other, firstly, it's not as sophisticated because you don't have an integrated flow within your structure of within the structure of your essay. And secondly, you could be like, oh no, I didn't prepare something that they've asked for. They asked me for, conflict, and I didn't talk about that as one of my themes, and so I don't know what to write. So that should never be the case. This should link to any theme or idea that they ask you to talk about, because you're going to cover all of them basically, but do so in a 3-paragraph structure. So when we start paragraph one, look at how Othello is established as a character. So he is, he's considered a tragic hero. So that's going back to Aristotle's theory that we talked about earlier in the previous video. And but before he's tragic, he's a hero, right? So he's like well respected. People regard him quite highly. He's a military leader, and people, you don't see we don't necessarily, he doesn't, I don't think he thinks of himself as being different from anyone else in terms of his status, because they do treat him like an equal, until he marries a white woman, which even for the day is very revolutionary to be looking at interracial marriages back then. Clearly that doesn't go well, which is understandable in some ways because of the time that it was written and the fact that that was really an unacceptable thing. But anyway, when we look at Othello and we see him initially, he is respected. So he's, talked about as being valiant Othello. They let him come to the court and present his case about Desdemona, and he's got rights and he's respected him. He's let off basically. Desdemona's father is obviously not very impressed, and you see a lot of his racist views come out in that elopement that Othello has with Desdemona. But initially speaking, Othello is quite reputable. Now, that being said, we see the racial prejudice come out particularly early on from Iago, and obviously then Brabantio. But Iago comes in and he starts dobbing on Othello and Desdemona, and the fact that, he says, even now, very now, an old black ram is tupping your white ewe. So very lewd image, obviously that's referring, tupping is sex. And it's, quite a crude image. And the other thing here is that Othello is compared to an old black ram. So clearly his race is something considered here to be quite crucial. And also it's quite a degrading image. So he's, compared to an animal who's like tupping. So as I mentioned in the previous video, there was a lot of stereotypical beliefs around men of color being sexually depraved, and lots of animalistic comparisons have been made over the centuries that really are very degrading. And what this does is highlights the racial prejudices and these generalizations during this period, which is something still very much relevant and today, and hopefully breaking down, but only through, you know, understanding this can we see the way that these stereotypes are created, and these fears are, you know, and this conditioning happens. So that's another thing that you can talk about, where you've got, you know, this character of Othello, like how is he established? So he's both revered, but then he's, you know, we also see this kind of inherent racism against him. You know, then you can also look at Brabantio's speech. So when it comes out that, you know, Desdemona and Othello have eloped, Brabantio is furious, and Othello's kind of shocked. He's like, oh, but like we were friends. So he talks about the fact that, you know, Brabantio used to have him over, and like they, you know, he would want him to share his stories. And anyway, that's how Desdemona obviously fell in love with him as well. But it was certainly not Brabantio's intent. So when it happens that, you know, that Desdemona falls in love with Othello, Brabantio just can't believe that. And he's just like, you know, how could, there's no way that, you know, she would fall in love with you, and is such a thing as thou. So he calls him a thing, and he starts accusing him of witchcraft, and like there's no way that she would, you know, that she would do something like that. So you know, yeah, there's a lot of flicking through my thing here. Here, so he, you know, talks about him having Othello having a sooty bosom. She would never run away. Like she had all these suitors. Why would she choose you? You've, you know, inflicted these foul charms, abused her delicate youth with drugs or minerals that weaken motion. So that's a really calls him a foul thief. So, oh gosh, so many metaphors, magical illusions, damned as thou art, you know, kind of devilish, thou hast enchanted her, she's in chains of magic, metaphor, oh my gosh, so much stuff. So, you know, so many kind of racial illusions, but also, yeah, like we can really see that the inappropriateness of, you know, contextually, of this interracial marriage. But anyway, it stands. Othello is not punished because Desdemona comes in and says, yeah, no, I chose to do this, and sorry, bye. So that's, you know, kind of amazing too. Desdemona stands up for herself, and like, you know, rejects her father's wishes, and says, you know, this is my new master, her new husband. So that's the kind of initial introduction we get into Othello, and as this sort of like these different, you know, dualistic in some ways, in the sense of like, you know, highly revered, but also these real undertones of like loathing and hatred and sort of racial bias and prejudice. So in the next one, I'm going to talk to you about where to go, paragraph 2.